The exploration vessel Horizon moved silently through the darkness of space near the fourth planet of the Kepler 442 system. Captain Daniel Morrison sat in his command chair watching the main screen as his crew ran their usual surveys of the unexplored region. His second officer, Commander Lisa Patterson, stood beside him reviewing the sensor data on her tablet, while Chief Engineer Kevin Brooks monitored the ship's systems from his station near the back of the bridge. The Horizon was a medium-sized research ship with 112 crew members dedicated to exploring new star systems and cataloging whatever they found. Daniel had been commanding the vessel for 6 years, and most of their missions were routine and uneventful. They would scan planets, take samples, send reports back to Earth Command, and move on to the next system. It was important work, but rarely exciting. Science Officer Patricia Hughes called out from her station that she was detecting an unusual energy signature in orbit around the fourth planet. Daniel ordered the ship to investigate, and within an hour they were approaching a massive structure floating in a slowly degrading orbit. The structure was clearly artificial and appeared to be some kind of vessel, but its design was unlike anything in human records or any known alien architecture that humanity had encountered in their 200 years of space exploration. Daniel assembled an away team led by Patricia and protected by security personnel under Lieutenant Jake Sullivan. The team suited up and took a shuttle across to the derelict structure. As they approached, they could see that the vessel was ancient and damaged, but still mostly intact. There were no signs of power or active systems. Patricia guided the shuttle to what appeared to be a docking port, and after some work, they managed to get it open. The team entered the derelict carefully with weapons ready and lights cutting through the darkness of the dead ship. The corridors were large and built for creatures much bigger than humans. Strange writing covered the walls in a language no one recognized. They moved deeper into the vessel, following Patricia's scanner as she tracked the source of the energy signature they had detected. After 20 minutes of walking through the silent corridors, they found a large chamber. Lieutenant Sullivan entered first with his weapon raised and his light swept across the room. What he saw made him stop completely. The chamber was a trophy room filled with the preserved remains of dozens of different alien species. Each specimen was displayed in a containment field with detailed information panels beside them. Patricia immediately began scanning everything while Sullivan's team secured the room. The science officer accessed one of the information panels and managed to get it working. What appeared on the screen made her blood run cold. The panel showed a holographic recording of the specimen's capture. The recording showed a peaceful alien city being attacked by armored warriors. The aliens tried to flee but were systematically hunted down and killed. The recording was labeled as a hunt, and the aliens were referred to as prey. Daniel arrived in the chamber with more crew members, and Patricia showed him what she had found. They began accessing more of the information panels, and each one told the same horrifying story. The species displayed here had all been hunted by the owners of this vessel. The recordings showed attack after attack, hunt after hunt, extinction after extinction. Dr. Marcus Chen, the ship's xenobiologist, examined the specimens and the data carefully. He determined that the trophy room contained remains from dozens of different species, and each one had been completely wiped out by the hunters. The recording showed that some of the extinct species had been peaceful farmers, while others had been technologically advanced civilizations with cities and space travel. None of that had mattered to the hunters. The crew spent hours exploring the derelict and downloading its database. They discovered that the hunters called themselves the Vacrian Imperium, and their entire civilization was built around hunting and exterminating other intelligent species. The Vacrians considered the complete destruction of another sentient race to be the ultimate achievement and the highest form of sport. They had been doing this for 3,000 years. Marcus analyzed the database and counted 73 different species that had been eliminated by the Vacrians. Each species had been studied carefully before the hunt began. The Vacrians would observe their prey for years, learning about their culture and technology and military capabilities. Then, when they were ready, the Vacrians would launch their attack and the systematic extinction would begin. No species had ever survived once the Vacrians marked them for hunting. Commander Patterson made another discovery in the ship's database that changed everything. She found surveillance reports about humanity. The reports were detailed and thorough. The Vacrians had been watching Earth and human colonies for 15 years. They had studied human language, culture, military strength, and expansion patterns. Every human world had been cataloged and assessed. At the end of the report was a simple designation that marked humanity for future hunting operations. The only reason humanity still existed was timing. The Vakrians had been busy exterminating 2 other species in a neighboring sector of space, and had not yet begun their hunt of humanity. But the reports made it clear that humans were next on their list. Earth and all 43 human colonies were scheduled to be eliminated once the Vakrians finished their current operations. Daniel immediately ordered all the data to be transmitted back to Earth Command on the highest priority channel. He sent a message explaining exactly what they had found and what it meant. Humanity was facing an extinction-level threat from an enemy that had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of genocide. The Vakrians had eliminated 73 intelligent species, and humans were marked to be number 74. The crew of the Horizon worked quickly to copy every piece of data from the derelict's computers. They took scans of every trophy and every recording. They needed Earth to understand exactly what kind of enemy they were facing. The Vakrians were not invaders looking for resources or territory. They were hunters who killed entire civilizations for sport and pride. After 2 days of intensive work, the away team returned to the Horizon with all the data they could carry. Daniel ordered the ship to set course for Earth at maximum speed. The journey would take months, but the data transmission had already been sent ahead at faster than light speeds. Earth Command would receive the warning long before the Horizon arrived home. As the Horizon accelerated away from the Kepler 442 system, none of the crew noticed that their investigation had triggered an automated beacon deep within the derelict. The beacon sent out a signal into deep space using Vakrian communication protocols. Somewhere far away in the darkness, the Vakrian Imperium received the signal and began analyzing it. The message was simple and automatic. The lost vessel had been discovered, and the beacon identified exactly who had found it. The Vakrians now knew that humanity had learned about them and their plans. The timeline for the hunt would need to be adjusted. The prey had been warned. 6 months had passed since the Horizon discovered the Vakrian derelict and returned to Earth with its terrible warning. The entire human civilization had transformed in those months. Every colony, every station, every settlement across 43 star systems had become a fortress. Admiral George Hamilton commanded the militarization effort from the massive orbital defense platform hanging above Earth. New weapons platforms appeared in orbit around every human world. The fleet expanded by 40% with new ships being built in. Record time at shipyards that now operated every hour of every day. General Claire Morrison led the United Earth Marine Corps, and she was Daniel's older sister. She had implemented a training program that prepared every single colonist for evacuation or resistance if the Vakrians came. Her philosophy was direct and simple. If the Vakrians wanted to hunt humanity, then humanity would make them pay with blood for every human life they took. Every colonist learned to fight. Every settlement built bunkers and weapons caches. Every world prepared for invasion. Dr. Amy Foster was humanity's leading expert on artificial intelligence, and she had been given the task of analyzing every piece of Vakrian technology. Recovered from the derelict, she worked day and night alongside Commander Richard Blake, who was the head of the Tactical Analysis Division. Together they studied the enemy weapons and ships and tactics. What they discovered was both encouraging and troubling at the same time. The Vakrians had superior technology and weapons and engines, but their entire military doctrine was built around attacking unprepared victims. They had never fought an enemy that was ready and waiting for them. The Vakrians made their first official contact on a Tuesday morning Earth time. The transmission came through on every human communication frequency simultaneously. A figure appeared on screens across all of human space. The creature was 7 feet tall with natural armor plating covering its body and eyes that seemed to glow with predatory intelligence. It spoke in perfect English that it had learned from monitoring human communications during the 15 years of surveillance. The creature identified itself as Huntmaster Vector, and it represented the Vakrian Imperium. Its message was delivered with absolute confidence. Vector explained the Vakrian tradition in detail. Humanity would be given 1 standard galactic year to prepare for the hunt. During this time, the Vakrians would not attack. This grace period was part of the Vakrian Code, and they considered it sporting to allow prey species to understand their fate and attempt survival. After 1 year, the hunt would begin, and it would not end until every human was dead and humanity was extinct. The transmission included recordings from previous hunts. The footage had been carefully selected to cause maximum fear. Human leaders watched cities burning on alien worlds. They saw ships being destroyed in space. They watched populations fleeing in terror before being methodically tracked down and eliminated. Vector expected humanity to spend the year in fear and chaos. He expected humans to fight among themselves and waste their preparation time in panic. This was the pattern the Vacrians had seen in previous prey species, and it made the eventual hunt much easier. President Jonathan Gray addressed humanity from the United Earth Assembly Building in Geneva. His speech was broadcast to every human settlement across the stars. He did not offer false comfort or make empty promises of safety. Instead, he told the complete truth. Humanity faced an enemy that had never been defeated in 3,000 years. The Vacrians had eliminated 73 intelligent species. They viewed the extinction of entire civilizations as sport and entertainment. They were technologically superior and had more experience in warfare than humanity could imagine. Then President Gray said something else. He said that humanity would not spend the year in fear. Humanity would spend the year preparing for war. Every human would contribute to the survival of the species. Every resource would be dedicated to building defenses and weapons. Every mind would focus on finding ways to defeat an enemy that had never lost. The Vacrians had made one critical mistake in their 3,000-year history. They had given humanity warning and time to prepare. Captain Daniel Morrison received a promotion to Commodore and was given command of the newly formed Hunter Fleet. The name was chosen deliberately as a message to the Vacrians. The fleet would not wait to be hunted. Instead, it would hunt the hunters. Daniel's flagship was a newly built battlecruiser named Retribution that was equipped with experimental weapons developed from studying Vacrian technology. The ship was fast and heavily armed, and designed specifically to fight Vacrian vessels. Commander Lisa Patterson took command of the Intelligence Division, and her mission was to locate Vacrian territory in space. Earth Command had decided that waiting for the Vacrians to attack would be suicide. Humanity needed to take the fight to the enemy before the year of preparation ended. Lisa's team worked constantly to analyze the data from the derelict and track Vacrian communication signals. They were looking for the location of Vacrian military, bases and fleet staging areas. Lieutenant Jake Sullivan received a promotion to major and became the commander of the newly formed Special Operations Group. His teams trained for hostile boarding actions and asymmetric warfare. Sullivan's philosophy challenged everything that human military tradition had taught for centuries. When facing a stronger enemy, you do not fight fair. You fight dirty and you fight mean and you use every advantage no matter how small. His teams learned to fight in zero gravity and in enclosed spaces and against opponents who were bigger and stronger than humans. The year of preparation became a time of unity across all of human space. 60 billion humans on 43 worlds worked together with singular purpose. Political differences were set aside. Economic competitions were forgotten. Religious and cultural divisions became irrelevant. Every human understood that they were part of a species fighting for survival against an enemy that wanted them extinct. Scientists developed new weapons based on principles the Vacrians had never encountered. Engineers built ships faster than anyone thought possible. Soldiers trained until they could fight in their sleep. Factory workers produced ammunition and equipment around the clock. Farmers grew food to support the military buildup. Teachers educated children about the threat and prepared them for a future that might include warfare. Everyone contributed something to the survival effort. Dr. Marcus Chen studied the Vacrian biology from the specimens they had recovered. He looked for weaknesses in their physiology. He discovered that Vacrians had excellent eyesight and hearing, but their sense of smell was poor. They were strong and had natural armor, but their joints were vulnerable. They could survive in Earth-like atmospheres but preferred slightly higher temperatures. Every detail was cataloged and shared with military planners who used the information to develop tactics. The months passed quickly. Human space became an armed fortress. The Hunter fleet grew to 23 warships. Intelligence teams located what they believed was a Vacrian staging area in the Zeta Reticuli system. President Gray made the final decision. Humanity would not wait for the year to end. Humanity would strike first and strike hard. The Vacrians had hunted 73 species to extinction, But they were about to learn what happened when the prey refused to be victims. They were about to learn that humanity did not just defend, humanity attacked. The year of preparation did not end with a Vacrian attack on human worlds. Instead, it ended with human warships appearing in Vacrian space without warning. Commander Lisa Patterson's intelligence division had successfully located the Vacrian staging ground in the Zeta Reticuli system. The base was positioned perfectly to launch hunting expeditions into human territory, and it was filled with Vacrian military vessels preparing for the hunt that was supposed to begin in 3 weeks. Commodore Daniel Morrison led the hunter fleet into the system with 23 warships, including his flagship Retribution. The fleet had traveled for 2 weeks through unmapped space to reach this location. Every ship was equipped with weapons that the Vacrians had never seen before. Chief Engineer Kevin Brooks had spent months developing kinetic impactors that could accelerate metal projectiles to incredible speeds. These simple slugs moving at relativistic velocity carried enough energy to crack planets, and the Vacrians had no defense against them. The attack began at dawn local time on the Vacrian base. The hunter fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, and immediately began accelerating toward the military installation. Vacrian sensors detected the human ships and alarms began sounding across the base. The Vacrians were confused because prey species were supposed to defend their homeworlds desperately, and then collapse when overwhelmed. Prey species did not attack first. Prey species did not bring the fight to the hunters. The Vacrian commander at the staging base launched 32 warships to intercept the human fleet. The Vacrian vessels were larger than human ships and carried more firepower. The Vacrian commander expected the humans to retreat when they saw the superior force being sent against them. Instead, the human fleet split into 3 groups and began a complex attack pattern that confused the Vacrian tactical systems. The first relativistic impactors fired by the human fleet crossed the distance between the opposing forces in seconds. 3 Vacrian warships simply ceased to exist as the metal slugs traveling at near light speed tore through their hulls and released devastating amounts of kinetic energy. The Vacrian commander could not understand what had happened. His ships had shields and armor that should have protected them, but the human weapons had gone through their defenses like they were not even there. The space battle lasted for 4 hours. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than Vacrian vessels. Human tactics were coordinated and precise, while Vacrian tactics were designed for overwhelming prey that was already frightened. Commander Richard Blake's tactical doctrine exploited every weakness in Vacrian military theory. The humans used the gravity of planets to slingshot their ships into unexpected positions. They used electronic warfare to blind Vacrian sensors. They concentrated fire on single targets instead of spreading their attacks. Major Jake Sullivan's special operations teams launched during the height of the battle. Their mission was to board Vacrian vessels and capture them intact if possible. Sullivan led one team personally toward a Vacrian command ship that had been disabled by human weapons. The boarding shuttle attached to the Vacrian hull and began cutting through the armored exterior. Within minutes, Sullivan and his 20 soldiers were inside the enemy vessel. The fighting inside the Vacrian ship was brutal and close. The corridors were designed for creatures 7 feet tall with natural armor. Sullivan's teams used plasma cutters that could slice through Vacrian armor plating. They threw explosive charges into rooms full of Vacrian soldiers. They fought room by room and corridor by corridor through a ship that was designed to be a predator's lair. The humans suffered heavy casualties, but they kept advancing. Sullivan himself killed 3 Vacrian warriors in hand-to-hand combat, using a combat knife when his weapon ran out of ammunition. After 2 hours of fighting inside the Vacrian command ship, Sullivan's team reached the bridge. The Vacrian commander and his staff fought to the death rather than surrender. Sullivan's team secured the bridge and began downloading data from the Vacrian computers. The navigational database contained the coordinates of other Vacrian military installations, and even more importantly, it contained maps of Vacrian territory. 2 other special operations teams successfully boarded and captured additional Vacrian vessels during the battle. One team brought back 42 Vacrian prisoners who had surrendered when they realized they could not win. This was unprecedented in Vacrian history. Vacrians never surrendered to prey species because they had never lost to prey species before. When the battle ended, the Vacrian staging base was destroyed. 19 Vacrian warships were eliminated and 3 were captured. The remaining 10 Vacrian vessels retreated deeper into their own territory. The cost to humanity was significant. 4 human ships were destroyed and over 300 human soldiers and crew members died in the battle. But the victory was absolute. Humanity had taken the fight to the Vakrians and won decisively. Dr. Marcus Chen interrogated the Vakrian prisoners using translation software developed from the derelict's database. What he learned changed everything that humanity thought they knew about the enemy. The Vakrians were not a galaxy-spanning empire. They controlled only about 200 star systems. Their reputation as unstoppable hunters was built on psychological warfare and careful target selection. They had spent 3,000 years attacking species that were peaceful or unprepared or isolated. They had carefully avoided species with strong military traditions or those protected by powerful neighbors. The Vakrian prisoners explained that their entire culture was built on the permanence of extinction. When the Vakrians eliminated a species, that species stayed dead forever. This absolute finality was what gave meaning to Vakrian achievements. The greatest Vakrian warriors were those who had participated in the most extinctions. Vakrian children were taught that the universe was divided into hunters and prey and that the Vakrians were the apex predators of the galaxy. General Claire Morrison used this intelligence to develop a new strategy for Earth Command. Humanity would not simply defend itself and wait for the next Vakrian attack. Instead, humanity would systematically dismantle the Vakrian Imperium piece by piece. Every Vakrian military base would be destroyed. Every Vakrian fleet would be hunted down. The Vakrians would learn what it felt like to be prey. News of the victory at Zeta Reticuli spread across human space within days. The reaction was immediate and powerful. 60 billion humans celebrated because they had been told for months that the Vakrians were unstoppable. Now they knew the truth. The Vakrians could be beaten. The Vakrians could be hurt. The Vakrians could bleed and die just like any other living creature. The Vakrian Imperium reacted to the defeat with shock and confusion. Huntmaster Vector was executed by the Vakrian High Council for his failure to properly assess the human threat. The council appointed a new Huntmaster named Calvin, who was known for his aggressive tactics and his hatred of prey species. Calvin immediately began organizing a massive military response. He demanded that all available Vakrian forces be redirected to eliminate humanity before the prey species could become an even bigger threat. But the Vakrians discovered a significant problem. Human space was too large to attack all at once. Any Vakrian fleet sent to attack a human colony now faced prepared defenses and rapid response forces from the hunter fleet. The Vakrians had achieved their previous successes through surprise attacks on unprepared victims. Against an enemy that was ready and aggressive, their tactical doctrine simply did not work. Over the next 6 months, the hunter fleet conducted 14 separate offensive operations against Vakrian positions. Each attack was carefully planned. Each attack captured more territory and more intelligence and more prisoners. The Vakrians were losing and they did not know how to stop losing. Dr. Amy Foster made a discovery that changed the entire direction of the war. She had been analyzing captured Vakrian computers for months and found something unexpected in their database systems. The Vakrians maintained detailed records of every species they had ever hunted. These records included biological samples, cultural archives, genetic material, and complete histories of each extinct civilization. The Vakrians had kept these records as trophies to celebrate their achievements, but to humanity, these records represented something completely different. They represented a chance to undo 3,000 years of genocide. Captain Patricia Hughes led a daring raid on a planet the Vakrians called the Archive World. This heavily defended planet contained the central repository where the Vakrian Imperium stored all records and samples from their 73 extinct prey species. Patricia commanded a strike force of 8 ships and 200 Marines. The mission was extremely dangerous because the Archive World was protected by orbital defense platforms and a garrison of Vakrian warriors. The attack on the Archive World began with the hunter fleet engaging the orbital defenses while Patricia's teams landed on the surface. The ground fighting was intense as human Marines battled Vakrian defenders through the massive Archive complex. Major Jake Sullivan's special operations teams led the assault into the most heavily protected vaults, where the genetic samples were stored. The Vakrians fought desperately to protect their trophies, but the human forces were determined and well-trained. After 6 hours of continuous combat, the human forces secured the Archive complex. Patricia's science teams began downloading every piece of data they could access, while Marines held the perimeter against Vakrian counterattacks. The genetic samples were carefully packed into specialized containers for transport. The cultural records and histories were copied to portable storage devices. The humans worked as fast as they could because they knew Vakrian reinforcements would arrive eventually. The extraction was completed just as a Vakrian relief fleet entered the system. Patricia's strike force retreated to their ships with all the recovered materials and escaped while the Hunter fleet covered their withdrawal. The mission was a complete success. Humanity had captured the genetic material and cultural data of all 73 extinct species. The samples were immediately transported back to Earth under heavy guard. President Jonathan Gray made an announcement that was broadcast across human space and transmitted directly to Vakrian territory. Humanity would not only survive the Vakrian threat, but would actively undo everything the Vakrians had accomplished in 3,000 years. Every species the Vakrians had hunted to extinction would be brought back through genetic reconstruction and cloning. The galaxy's greatest predators would witness the resurrection of all their victims. The extinctions they had caused would be reversed. The psychological impact on the Vakrian Imperium was immediate and devastating. Vakrian culture was built entirely on the concept of permanent extinction. When Vakrians killed a species, that species was supposed to stay dead forever. This permanence was what gave meaning to Vakrian achievements and status. The greatest Vakrian warriors had participated in multiple extinctions, and their fame rested on the finality of what they had done. The possibility that their victims might return shattered fundamental Vakrian beliefs about the universe and their place in it. Morale collapsed across Vakrian military units. Vakrian soldiers began questioning why they should fight if their historic victories could be undone. Vakrian civilians began protesting against their own government, demanding an end to the war. The Vakrian High Council faced a crisis that threatened the stability of their entire civilization. Everything they had built for 3,000 years was being challenged by prey species that refused to accept their role. Huntmaster Calvin responded with desperation. He proposed a suicide fleet that would strike directly at Earth and eliminate humanity's homeworld, even if it cost every ship in the attacking force. The Vakrian High Council approved the plan because they believed that destroying Earth would break human resistance and prevent the resurrection of extinct species. Calvin assembled 47 Vakrian warships for the mission. It was the largest military force the Vakrians had ever gathered in one place. Commander Lisa, Patterson's intelligence network, had infiltrated Vakrian communications through captured computer systems and turncoat Vakrians who no longer believed in the war. Her analysts detected the preparations for the suicide fleet and tracked its movements as it departed Vakrian space. Earth Command knew the attack was coming and knew exactly when it would arrive. Commodore Daniel Morrison's Hunter fleet was ordered to return to Earth immediately and prepare for the largest battle of the war. The engagement that became known as the Battle of Earth's Threshold took place at the edge of the Sol system near the orbit of Neptune. The Vakrian suicide fleet entered normal space from faster than light travel, expecting to find minimal defenses and a clear path to Earth. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by 70 human warships, including every vessel of the Hunter fleet and the entire home defense force that had been built over the past year. The battle began with a massive human alpha strike. Relativistic kinetic impactors fired by the human fleet destroyed 6 Vakrian ships in the first 30 seconds. Human plasma torpedoes tore through Vakrian armor. Electronic warfare systems blinded Vakrian sensors and targeting computers. The Vakrians had expected a desperate defense by a frightened prey species. Instead, they faced a coordinated military operation executed by disciplined forces that had been preparing for this exact scenario. The Vakrians fought with suicidal desperation because they knew their entire civilization was at stake. Vakrian ships rammed human vessels when their weapons were exhausted. Vakrian warriors continued fighting even when their ships were crippled and disabled. Calvin personally commanded the Vakrian flagship and led charge after charge into the human formation, trying to break through to Earth. The fighting was savage and brutal, and both sides suffered terrible losses. Major Jake Sullivan led boarding teams onto the Vakrian flagship during the height of the battle. His teams fought through corridors filled with smoke and fire and floating bodies. They encountered Vakrian warriors who fought with claws and teeth when their weapons failed. Sullivan's soldiers pushed forward meter by meter until they reached the command deck. Huntmaster Calvin was waiting there with his personal guard. The final fight was brief and vicious. Sullivan killed Calvin in hand-to-hand combat and his team secured the bridge. The battle lasted 4 hours from beginning to end. When it was over, only 3 Vakrian vessels managed to escape back into faster-than-light travel. The rest of the suicide fleet was destroyed or captured. The cost to humanity was heavy, with 12 ships destroyed and over 3,000 killed. But the victory was absolute and decisive. The Vakrians had thrown their largest fleet against Earth and failed completely. They had bet everything on one desperate attack and lost. The destruction of the suicide fleet broke something fundamental in the Vakrian Imperium. News of the defeat spread through Vakrian space within days. The Vakrian military was shattered. The Vakrian government was in chaos. The Vakrian population was demoralized and frightened. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Vakrians understood what it felt like to be prey facing extinction. The hunters had become the hunted, and they did not know how to survive. Admiral Daniel Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Retribution as the hunter fleet approached the Vakrian homeworld. The journey from Earth had taken 4 months, and during that time, the Vakrian Imperium had continued to collapse from within. Vakrian military units were surrendering without fighting. Vakrian colonies were declaring independence from the central government. The civilization that had spent 3,000 years hunting other species was tearing itself apart now that it faced its own extinction. The hunter fleet had grown to 50 warships and was accompanied by diplomatic vessels carrying representatives from the United Earth Assembly. Ambassador Helen Carter led the diplomatic mission with orders to negotiate the complete and unconditional surrender of the Vakrian Imperium. Dr. Marcus Chen accompanied the fleet to coordinate what would eventually become the war, crimes tribunals for Vakrian leaders responsible for genocide. The fleet arrived at Vakris Prime to find it defended by 130 Vakrian warships and extensive orbital defense platforms. This was everything the Vakrians had left after a year of continuous defeats. The Vakrian High Council broadcast a message of defiance declaring that Vakrians would never surrender to prey species. They would rather die fighting than submit to creatures they had always considered inferior and suitable only for hunting. Daniel gave the Vakrians 48 hours to evacuate civilians from military zones and surrender peacefully. The Vakrians refused because their culture considered surrender to be the ultimate dishonor. They believed that death in battle was preferable to the shame of submitting to prey. Daniel understood their position, but he had orders from President Jonathan Gray. The Vakrian threat had to be eliminated completely, or humanity would face another hunting expedition within a generation. The Second Battle of Vakros Prime began exactly 48 hours after Daniel's ultimatum expired. The engagement involved 180 warships total, making it the largest space battle in recorded galactic history. Major Jake Sullivan's special operations teams attacked the orbital defense platforms, while the main fleet engaged the Vakrian warships. The fighting was intense from the very first moment. Human tactical doctrine developed by Commander Richard Blake exploited every weakness that had been discovered in Vakrian military theory over the past year. The Vakrians were experienced hunters, but they had never developed real military tactics for fighting against organized opponents. Their ships were designed for intimidation and overwhelming firepower, but lacked the maneuverability and coordination needed for fleet combat. Human ships moved in coordinated groups that supported each other, while Vakrian ships fought individually like predators competing for prey. Chief Engineer Kevin Brooks's experimental weapons proved decisive in the battle. The relativistic kinetic impactors destroyed 3 Vakrian capital ships in the opening minutes. Human plasma torpedoes that had been specifically designed to penetrate Vakrian armor tore through their defensive lines. Electronic warfare systems disrupted Vakrian communications and targeting. The battle that the Vakrians expected to be their final glorious stand turned into a massacre. After 8 hours of continuous fighting, the Vakrian fleet was broken. 72 Vakrian warships were destroyed and 41 were captured by boarding teams. 17 managed to escape into deep space, but they were pursued by human vessels. The orbital defense platforms were all neutralized by Sullivan's special operations groups. The Vakrian homeworld was completely defenseless. For the first time in its history, President Jonathan Gray personally traveled to the Vakros system aboard the diplomatic vessel Unity. He transmitted one final offer to the Vakrian High Council. They could surrender and face trial for their crimes, or they could face orbital bombardment until their government collapsed. The choice was theirs, but there would be no third option. Humanity had come too far and sacrificed too much to allow the Vakrian threat to continue existing. The Vakrian High Council attempted one final act of defiance by trying to activate a planetary defense weapon capable of destroying every human ship in orbit. The weapon had been built centuries ago and was supposed to be their ultimate protection against any threat. But Dr. Amy Foster had spent the past year studying every piece of Vakrian technology that humanity had captured. She had infiltrated Vakrian computer networks and disabled the weapon's firing systems before the Council could activate it. With no options remaining and no hope of victory, the Vakrian High Council surrendered. The announcement was broadcast across all Vakrian territories, and the remaining resistance collapsed immediately. For the first time in their 3,000-year history, the Vakrians submitted to another species. General Claire Morrison's Marines landed on Vakros Prime to accept the formal surrender and secure the planet. The Vakrian population expected to be exterminated because that was what they would have done to a defeated enemy. Instead, they were disarmed and their government was dissolved. The surviving members of the High Council were arrested to stand trial for genocide and crimes against sentient species. Ambassador Helen Carter established a transitional government with the goal of eventually integrating the Vakrian population into the galactic community as peaceful citizens, rather than predators. That the process of transforming Vakrian culture would take decades, but humanity was committed to it. Dr. Marcus Chen led the International Tribunal for Vakrian War Crimes, which was held on a neutral space station. Over 800 Vakrian officials stood trial for their roles in the extinction of 73 species. The trials were broadcast across both human and Vakrian space, so that everyone could see justice being served. Each extinct species was represented by human advocates who presented evidence of Vakrian crimes. The tribunal examined the systematic nature of Vakrian genocides and the deliberate targeting of civilian populations. Many Vakrians claimed they had not understood that their prey were truly sentient, but the evidence proved otherwise. The Vakrians had studied their victims extensively before hunting them. They knew exactly what they were destroying. 417 Vakrian officials were convicted of genocide and sentenced to life imprisonment. 73 Vakrians were executed, with one execution for each extinct species. The executions were controversial within human society, but President Gray defended them as necessary justice for civilizations that could no longer speak for themselves. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster led the Resurrection project using the genetic material recovered from the archive world. The first species to be resurrected was called the Kelvorians, who had been a peaceful aquatic civilization eliminated 300 years earlier. 50 Kelvorian children were born using genetic reconstruction and artificial wombs. They were raised by human caretakers who studied Kelvorian cultural records to teach them their own history and traditions. Over the next 10 years, 18 of the 73 extinct species were successfully resurrected. The populations remained small, with only hundreds or thousands of individuals, but they were growing. Captain Patricia Hughes directed the educational programs that ensured resurrected species learned about their own cultures, rather than simply becoming humans. The goal was to eventually return each species to their homeworlds, where they could rebuild their civilizations. A massive monument was constructed in orbit around Vakros Prime, called the Monument to the 73. It contained the names of every individual from every species killed by the Vakrians. The monument took 5 years to complete, as researchers worked to identify as many victims as possible from recovered records. The dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from all resurrected species, human officials, and reformed Vakrian leaders. Admiral Daniel Morrison took command of a new program called the Exploration Initiative, dedicated to making first contact with unknown civilizations and protecting them from predatory species. His new flagship was named Discovery and was designed for long-range exploration and humanitarian missions. Before departing on his first mission, he returned to the Kepler 442 system, where the Horizon had discovered the Vakrian derelict 2 years earlier. Standing in the trophy room that had been converted into a museum, Daniel recorded a message for future explorers. He explained how humanity had discovered they were marked for extinction by hunters who had already killed 73 civilizations. He described how humanity refused to be victims and fought back and won. He talked about the resurrection of extinct species and the reformation of Vacrian culture. His final words were simple and direct. Predators may be strong, but organized and determined prey is stronger. Never accept extinction. Never stop fighting. Never forget those who were lost. The Discovery departed for deep space, beginning humanity's mission as protectors of sentient life across the galaxy. The hunters had hunted every species they found, but when they came for Earth, they learned a lesson that cost them everything. Humanity does not just survive, humanity pursues.